Good morning. I'm tired. Go watch my short that I posted yesterday. I've been doing a little bit of concrete work in a crawl space, so that's tiring, but fulfilling. Anyways, cancel culture. It's not real. I'm just kidding, by the way. This is a clickbait title, but I do have a memory of a few years ago when cancel culture really started to become a thing. The left used to love to say that they used to gaslight and say cancel culture isn't real. And then there would be mental gymnastics around the idea that it's actually consequence culture, that you have freedom of speech, but you don't have freedom from consequences. And that has ultimately led to an ironic turning of the tables, or an implementation of this idea that swords are often double-edged. So now the sword of cancel culture is affecting the left, and they're crying out saying, whatever happened to freedom of speech? It's really interesting watching the reversal of the roles. It used to be the right getting canceled and crying, freedom of speech, blah 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 blah. Now it's the left being canceled, crying about freedom of speech, and the right supporting the canceling of people on the left. You kind of knew it would happen if you're somewhat sane and rational and logical. When you watch these culture war crap issues happen, it's really depressing, to be honest. And I don't really like the idea of coordinating efforts of people to contact somebody's employer to notify them of something they may have said that was naughty or bad. I don't really like that mob mentality, sort of mob justice efforts. But at the same time, I do support an employer's right to hire and fire someone entirely based on their own whim. I don't like this idea that people should be protected in their jobs. I think if you are an employer, you should be allowed to fire people for whatever reason you want. And I know that's a controversial thing to say, but that comes down to the freedom of association. And it goes even further than that. And so I'm looping in the Charlie Kirk thing. I don't know if I actually said that is what this is, but I just want to talk about the Charlie Kirk thing real quick. That has impacted me a lot, not because I'm a Christian conservative like him, but my own personal journey. I've been trying to have these conversations, and it's been really depressing watching people turn into NPC propaganda repeaters, or people who just don't even care, people who just completely avoid the news and completely avoid any conversation about anything difficult. And so someone was killed for having views that are very similar to mine. Very similar. I'm not a Christian conservative, but I think trans people are mentally ill. I think abortion is wrong. What else? Those are the two big ones. But anyways, let's circle back to my ultimate beliefs and how it connects to all of this. Employers should be able to fire anyone for any reason. Voluntary association, the freedom of voluntary association. But also, they should be able to ask questions in an interview to determine if there is an ideological, personal, philosophical connection between the employer and the employee. For example, questions about religion. There are, if you work in any corporate capacity, that during the interview process, there are questions you're just not allowed to ask. I think even you're not allowed to ask if someone's pregnant, right? I totally think you should be able to say, oh, you're going to have a baby in 6 months. I don't really want to, invest resources in training you and onboarding you at this current moment. Some jobs don't require much training and onboarding, like being a waitress. You could just jump into that, no problem. But other jobs require a lot of investment, and it should be okay to say, no, I don't want to invest in you. And you should then ultimately, as an employer, be able to ask, did you celebrate the death of Charlie Kirk? Do you think conservatives should be aggressed upon? You should be able to ask those questions. But unfortunately, we live in a very, very controlled world. I think it's a pretty fascist reality that gives me a lot of pushback. But then I always refer to the old George Carlin clip where George is talking about, it's a big club and you ain't in it, right? And he's talking about how fascist things are, and people clap like seals. But now you say fascism and people think you're just some dumb Antifa LARPer, which I'm not. I think Antifa's retarded. But at the same time, we have a lot of rules and restrictions around how we live our lives, how we conduct business. It's not an exaggeration. We have a large portion of our money taken from us against our will in the form of taxes. And then, the government, which is in the game of allowing you, this is the big thing that I don't talk about enough that maybe I should. In communism, you're just not allowed private property, right? But in fascism, you're allowed private property, but the government gets to tell you what you can do with it. We live in a world where you're allowed to have a car if you ask for permission from the government in the form of registration, if you pay the friends of the government in the banking and insurance industry money to insure your car, and then, oh yeah, let's just give you a high interest loan while we're at it, so you're further helping my friends in the banking industry. And oh yeah, if you want to open a car dealership, you can't just randomly open a car dealership. There's a whole process to it. New car dealerships, you just can't go open a new car dealership. You have to then work with the automotive industry and create certain, I'm getting a little off subject. I'm sorry, I'm rambly, but America's pretty fascist. Yeah, we have this perception of private property. You can go buy land, but then you have to get all this permission to do whatever you want on your land. So many building permits. Legitimately, I'll wrap up the video here. One of the jobs we've been working on, it's been like a 3-year bureaucratic nightmare with over 30 inspections. And now that it's been so long, some of them have expired. And so now they have to get re-inspected. And it's further complicated because things have been done since this inspection and that inspection, and they might not be able to access the things they need to look at. It's a fucking nightmare. Oh, Seattle, Washington. We started talking about cancel culture and ended up talking about, fascism, but ultimately freedom. It's just freedom. You should have freedom. And we've been losing it at a very rapid pace, I'd say, for the last 20 years, but it's just been a snowball accumulating mass and momentum into this massive authoritarian state we're now up against. And I've come to this realization that I think the concept of revolution and subverting the government, like V for Vendetta, such a great movie, but that's intentional. They want people programmed with that romanticized version of the revolution because it actually ultimately helps further their agenda. The more we fight amongst each other and the more we think we can beat the government, the more destabilized our communities become, and they win. So really, the revolution is not the answer. For the longest time, I thought it was. And I'm glad that I'm breaking free from that paradigm. The real revolution is the return to the planet, which is a narrative that you don't see anywhere in the mainstream media, or you do, but it's like this big when other narratives are much bigger. The return to the planet, that's the real revolution. All right, I'll end the video here. Thank you very much. Much love.